The first thing I ever read from Calder Maddox was his wedding ring. Not metaphorically, literally. The moment his hand brushed mine during the bonding ceremony 3 years ago, I felt it. A cold flash of intent behind his eyes that had nothing to do with love. A flicker of calculation. A decision already made before the officiant finished speaking. I ignored it. That was my first mistake. And I have made exactly 47 of them since, because I counted. I am that kind of Omega. My name is Elian Voss Maddox, and I can touch anything. A coffee mug, a door frame, a stranger's coat, and feel every emotion that object has ever absorbed. Every argument screamed in its direction, every tear dropped nearby, every secret whispered against it in the dark. You would think a man with that ability would be impossible to betray. Yes, you would be wrong. Turns out when you love someone badly enough, you stop touching the things that might tell you the truth. It was a Tuesday in October when my life ended the first time. Ashford, Connecticut in autumn looks like someone hired God to stage a movie set. Red maples bleeding color all over the old colonial streets. Iron-gated estates sitting fat and quiet behind manicured hedges. The kind of town where money is older than the sidewalks. The Maddox estate sat at the top of Carver Hill like it had been there since the earth cooled. All limestone and arched windows and the particular silence of a house that has never once been warm. I liked the cold. I had learned to. I came home early that Tuesday because my last consult in Hartford finished ahead of schedule. I was a behavioral specialist. Ironic, right? I'd given my ability, contracted to 3 different firms who paid me very well to read rooms and people without ever explaining exactly how I did it. The Maddox name helped open doors. I had told myself that was fine, that I was using the system, not the other way around. I told myself a lot of things in those days. The estate was quiet when my car crunched up the gravel drive. No pack vehicles out front, which meant Rhett and Sawyer were still at the Maddox Holdings Tower downtown. Calder's black Range Rover was parked sideways near the side entrance, like he had been in a hurry and stopped caring halfway through. My stomach did a small thing it sometimes did near that car. Not love exactly. More like the memory of love, which is what love becomes after 3 years of being carefully, systematically underfed. I should have texted first. Why every cheated-on Omega in history says that. I should have texted first. I didn't. I walked through the East Garden entrance because the lock code was my birthday, which in hindsight was either romantic or the most elaborate guilt management I had ever witnessed. The hallway smelled like cedar and something else. Something floral and warm, and completely wrong for this house. My ability does not require intentional activation. It just happens. It is like having a radio permanently tuned to a frequency no one else can hear. So when my hand caught the banister on the staircase purely by reflex, what hit me was not a polite impression. It was a wave. Laughter. Female. Recent. Maybe 40 minutes ago. A particular kind of ease. The ease of someone who has been in this house before and stopped being careful about it. And underneath that, and woven through the grain of the wood like smoke and curtains, Calder. His emotional signature as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. Except the feeling attached to his presence on this banister was not stress from work, was not the particular cold distance he wore around me like armor. It was relief, the specific exhaled, boneless relief of a man who has finally gotten back to the place he actually wants to be. I stood there on the bottom step for 4 full seconds. I know because I counted those too. Then I went upstairs, the door to the east bedroom, the guest room, the one I had stopped going near because it always gave me a low hum of wrongness I had been too tired to investigate, was not fully closed. I did not push it open dramatically. I did not stand in the doorway with my hand raised and my heart performing. I was not in a movie, despite what Ashford, Connecticut seemed to believe about itself. I pushed the door open the way you open something you already know is going to change you. Slowly, giving yourself one last second of the version of your life where you do not know yet. Brianna Holt was sitting on the edge of the bed, pulling her hair back into place. She was wearing Calder's shirt, the charcoal one I had bought him for his birthday in August, and she had the relaxed, unbothered expression of a woman who has long since stopped worrying about getting caught. Calder was standing at the window with his back to me. He knew I was there before he turned. I saw it in the way his shoulders changed. That micro-tightening, the breath held one count too long. His psychic sensitivity was nothing like mine. But 3 years of sharing a bond will teach a man to feel when his omega has entered a room. He turned slowly, and the thing that shattered me, not cracked, not bruised, shattered, was not guilt on his face. It was exhaustion, like I was the problem he had been waiting to finally deal with. "Elian," he said. That was it. Just my name. Flat and careful, the way you say something when you have already rehearsed the conversation and decided how much of yourself you are willing to give. Brianna did not look embarrassed. She looked at me the way people look at a piece of furniture they have been told will eventually be moved out of the room. My ability fired without permission. My hand was against the doorframe, and I felt everything this room had held in the last 2 hours. Warmth, laughter, a whispered, "I've missed you." The particular silence of two people completely at ease with each other. The contrast against what Calder and I had been for the last year was so violent it felt physical. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I looked at Calder Maddox, the alpha I had built 3 years of my life around. The man whose ring I had been wearing on my right hand since the day he told me left-hand placement was a Maddox tradition I should not read into, which in retrospect was one of the most breathtaking pieces of audacity I had ever allowed to pass without comment. And I said very quietly, "You know what's funny? I touched your ring the day we bonded, and I felt exactly this. I just loved you more than I trusted myself." He opened his mouth. I held up one hand. "Don't. Whatever it is, save it for someone who needs the explanation." And then I smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because I had read enough human emotion in enough rooms to know that the smile of an omega who has just decided he is done is the most terrifying thing an alpha will ever see. Calder went very still. Good. And I stood there, holding that smile like a weapon I had only just realized I owned. Here is what nobody tells you about psychometry. The worst part is not feeling the betrayal. The worst part is feeling how long it has been going on. Because the emotional residue in that room was not fresh. It was layered, weeks deep, maybe months. The kind of warmth that builds when two people stop being careful because they have already decided the third person in the equation does not matter enough to be afraid of. I had walked past that guest room door approximately 200 times in the last year. 200 times. And every single time, some quiet part of my ability had sent up a small, polite flag that I had folded neatly and put in a drawer labeled "Not Today." So yes, the smile stayed. Because if I let it drop, I was going to have to feel all 200 of those moments at once, and I did not have that kind of time right now. Brianna cleared her throat. I turned to look at her with the specific patience of a man who has just decided that absolutely nothing in this room can hurt him anymore. "You should probably put a different shirt on," I said pleasantly. "That one's dry clean only, and you look like you've been living in it." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Elian." Calder's voice had shifted, softer now, which was somehow worse than the flat version. Soft meant he was switching to management mode, the voice he used when he wanted to control the temperature of a room without appearing to try. "Can we talk about this like adults?" I tilted my head. That's a fascinating request coming from a man who just got caught, but sure, Calder. Let's be adults. Which adult would you like me to be? The one who pretends he didn't feel everything in this room the second he touched the banister downstairs? Or the one who's been quietly losing his mind for a year, trying to figure out why his own house feels like a stranger's? Calder's jaw tightened. There it was, the flash of something real behind the management voice. Not guilt, not yet. Something closer to the frustration of a man who has been very comfortable and has just been made uncomfortable. "It's not what you're making it into," he said. I stared at him. "Calder." I said his name the way you say a word you are hearing for the first time and finding mildly absurd. "Your shirt is on the floor. Brianna Holt is sitting on the guest bed in my house wearing my gift to you, looking at me like I'm a scheduling conflict. I have a superpower specifically designed to detect emotional history, and this room is basically screaming at me." I paused. "What exactly would you like me to make it into?" Brianna made a sound. Something between a scoff and a laugh. I looked at her again, calmly. The way you look at something you are cataloging rather than engaging with. Was that a laugh? I asked. It's just, she started, and her voice had the particular confidence of a woman who had been told, probably repeatedly, us that she was the real story here. You're very composed for someone in your position. My position, I repeated. Elian, please. Calder stepped forward. No, let her finish, I said. I genuinely wanted to hear this. My position. Go ahead. Brianna looked at Calder like she was checking whether she had permission. He said nothing. She took that as a yes, which told me everything I needed to know about who had been running this particular arrangement. You haven't been what he needs for a long time, she said, carefully, like she had rehearsed it. This isn't about you being bad. It's just about fit. Fit. I let that word sit in the air between us for a moment. Then I nodded slowly, the way you nod when someone has just said something so genuinely extraordinary that your brain needs a second to file it correctly. Fit, I said. When right. Okay. So I was just a bad fit. 3 years, a bonding ceremony, a ring, 2 relocated career contracts, and approximately 47 moments I should have walked away, but chose him instead, and the summary is fit. I looked at Calder. She's good, I'll give you that. Stop. His voice cracked slightly on the word. Just slightly. A hairline fracture in the management voice that I clocked and stored away. I'm not doing anything, I said. You're doing that thing where you make everyone feel stupid. Calder. I kept my voice very even. You are stupid. I say that with the full emotional clarity of a man who is currently touching a doorframe that remembers her laughing in your kitchen last Thursday. I watched his face change in the Thursday before that, and what feels like a Sunday in August that I really do not want to examine further. The room went quiet, not the polite kind of quiet, the kind that falls when someone has said a true thing and the air needs a moment to adjust to it. Brianna's composed expression flickered. Just once. She had not known about the psychometry. Most people did not, because I did not advertise it. It was not the kind of thing that made dinner parties easier. Calder looked at me, and for the first time since I had opened that door, I saw something that was not exhaustion and was not frustration. It was fear. Not of losing me. Fear of being fully seen. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough, I said. Not long enough? Both. It's complicated when you love someone stupid. He flinched. Good. I straightened up. I took my hand off the doorframe and rolled my shoulders back. I'm going to go downstairs, I said conversationally. I'm going to make coffee because I have been awake since 5 this morning and I deserve it. And then, when Rhett and Sawyer get home, we are all going to have a very interesting conversation. I smiled again, the one Calder had gone still for. Together. I turned and walked down the hall. Behind me, I heard Calder say my name once more. I did not stop. The kitchen smelled like cedar and expensive coffee beans, and the particular kind of silence that settles into a house when something has just broken inside it. I filled the kettle, set it on the burner, pulled my favorite mug from the cabinet. The heavy ceramic one I had bought myself from a little shop in Hartford on a Tuesday, when Calder had canceled our anniversary dinner for the 2nd year running, and I had decided that at minimum I deserved good coffee infrastructure. I touched the mug for exactly 1 second before I set it down. It gave me back loneliness. Mine. Months of it, absorbed into ceramic like a quiet confession I had been making to myself every single morning without realizing it. I let go of the mug and focused on the kettle. Okay, fine. Even my kitchenware was trying to have a moment with me. Noted. The thing about having psychometry in a crisis is that your own emotions become the loudest thing in the room. Everything I touched was giving me back my own heartbreak, slightly repackaged, which was deeply unhelpful and also, honestly, a little on the nose. I did not need my coffee mug to tell me I had been lonely. I had been there for that. I heard footsteps on the stairs. One set, measured and deliberate. Calder. I did not turn around. He came into the kitchen and stopped somewhere behind me, close enough that I could feel the particular shift in air pressure that came with a bonded alpha in distress. 3 years of shared biology meant my nervous system recognized him the way you recognize a weather change before the clouds arrive. A low instinctive pull that my brain had learned to translate as home, and my heart was currently in the process of evicting, from that definition. Elian, he said. Third time. Same name. Completely different weight each time he said it. This version was the one that used to work on me. Quiet and careful, like I was something he did not want to startle. Getting Calder, I said back, in the same tone, because I have never been above a little light mimicry. He exhaled. Can you look at me? I'm making coffee. You're avoiding me. I'm making coffee, I said again. I do one thing at a time. It keeps me grounded. You should try it. Pick one woman, for example. The silence behind me had a texture to it. I had learned in 3 years to read Calder's silences the way other people read facial expressions. This one was the silence of a man who knew he deserved that and hated that he knew it. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, he said. I poured the hot water, watched the coffee bloom dark and slow in the French press, took a breath. How did you plan for it to happen? I asked genuinely. I'm curious. Was there a version of this where I found out gently? Where you sat me down with a nice charcuterie board and said, hey, Elian, I've been using the guest room for something other than guests because I feel like I missed that meeting. It wasn't like that. Then explain what it was like. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're not easy to be with, Elian. I stopped moving. The kitchen was very still. I turned around slowly and looked at him. He was leaning against the island with his arms crossed, and he had the expression of a man who had just said a true thing and was bracing for what came back. I'm not easy to be with, I repeated. You feel everything. You know things. I can't hide anything from you, and sometimes a man just needs to not be seen that clearly all the time. He met my eyes. It's exhausting. I looked at him for a long moment, and then, because I could not help it, I laughed. Not a performance laugh. A real one. The short, slightly horrified kind that escapes when reality says something so spectacularly backwards that your body does not know what else to do with it. Calder. I set the coffee press down. You cheated on me because I was too perceptive? I'm not saying it was right. No, I know, but I want to make sure I have this accurately. The problem in your assessment is that I am too emotionally intelligent. I pressed 2 fingers to my mouth. That is genuinely the most creative thing you have ever said to me, and I have watched you negotiate a $40 million real estate deal using only eye contact and mild disappointment. His jaw tightened. Gee, you're doing it again. Making you feel stupid? Making everything into a performance. Calder. My voice came out quieter than I intended, stripped of the humor for just a second, just long enough to say the real thing underneath it. I touch the world and feel what it remembers. I have been feeling this house remember her for months. Every time I walked past that room, every time I sat in this kitchen, every time I touched anything in this house with your energy on it, I felt something wrong, and I talked myself out of it because I loved you more than I trusted what I knew. I picked up my coffee mug. So no, I'm not performing. I'm just the version of me that exists after I stop protecting you from what I already know. He looked at me. Really looked, the way he almost never did anymore. Then the front door opened. For 2 sets of footsteps, familiar weight and rhythm, the particular confident stride of men who had grown up owning every floor they walked across. Rhett and Sawyer were home. I raised my mug toward the kitchen doorway in a small private toast to whatever was about to happen. Perfect timing, I said quietly. Let's see if exhausting runs in the family. Rhett came in first. He always did. Not because he was the oldest. All 3 of them were 20 minutes apart and had spent their entire lives arguing about what that meant. But because Rhett moved through the world like it had been arranged specifically for his arrival and was simply confirming what he already suspected. He was tall in the way that felt deliberate. Dark hair still neat despite a full day at Maddox Holdings. Suit jacket over one arm, collar open at the throat. The particular energy of a man who had been the smartest person in every room he had entered today and was mildly bored about it. He saw me standing at the kitchen island with my coffee. He saw Calder standing 6 feet away with the posture of a man waiting for a verdict. Rhett's eyes moved between us exactly once. What happened? He said, not a question, a calculation. Sawyer came in behind him and nearly walked into his back when Rhett stopped moving. Sawyer was broader, warmer looking, the kind of face that made people trust him immediately, which I had learned was its own particular kind of dangerous. He had his phone in one hand and a dry cleaning bag over his shoulder, and he looked up from the screen with the easy smile that he deployed the way other people deployed punctuation, automatically and constantly. And the smile faded when he read the room. "Okay," Sawyer said slowly. "This feels like a whole thing." "It is a whole thing," I confirmed pleasantly. Calder said nothing. I noticed he had not moved to intercept them, had not pulled either of his brothers aside to manage the narrative before it reached me. Either he had not had time, or, more interestingly, some part of him had decided that managing this particular narrative was no longer something he was capable of. Rhett set his jacket down on the back of a chair and looked at me with those careful, measuring eyes. "Elian, talk to me." "I'd love to," I said. "Coffee first. Do you want some? I made enough for what I'm predicting will be a fairly long conversation." "Elian," his voice was the low, steady kind, the kind built for boardrooms and for talking people off ledges. What's going on?" I took a sip of my coffee, set the mug down, looked at all three of them standing in my kitchen, three versions of the same expensive, devastating face, and felt the full absurdity of my life settle over me like a coat I had forgotten I was wearing. "Brianna Holt is upstairs," I said. "In the guest room, in Calder's shirt." I paused. "The charcoal one, the birthday one, just for the full picture." Sawyer's hand tightened around his phone. Rhett went very still. Neither of them looked at Calder with surprise. That was the moment. That small, specific absence of surprise. It hit me somewhere below the ribs, quiet and precise, the way the worst realizations always arrive, not with a crash, with a click. "You knew," I said. Rhett's expression did not change. "Elian." "How long?" I said, still calm. Impressively calm, honestly. I was a little proud of myself. "How long did you both know?" Sawyer exhaled through his nose and looked at the ceiling. That was a yes. Rhett looked at me directly, which I respected even as I wanted to put my coffee mug through a window. "It wasn't our place to tell you." "It wasn't your place," I repeated. "I live in this house. I sleep in this house. I have touched every surface of this house for 3 years and felt something wrong and convinced myself I was being paranoid, and it was not your place." "We told him to end it," Sawyer said quietly. He was looking at the floor. His voice had lost the easy warmth entirely, and what was underneath it was something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. "Multiple times." "Wonderful," I said. "That's genuinely wonderful. You told him to end it. It multiple times. And in the meantime, every Sunday dinner, every PAC meeting, every time you both sat across from me and looked me in the eye, you were just what, hoping it would sort itself out?" Nobody answered. The kitchen was doing that thing again, where the silence had weight. My ability was firing on every surface I was touching, the countertop, the mug, the cool edge of the island under my fingertips, and what it was giving back was layered and horrible. Dinners where the three of them had exchanged looks I had not caught. A conversation in this kitchen. Recent, urgent. Rhett's voice low and sharp saying something needed to be handled. Sawyer's hand on Calder's shoulder. Not comfort, pressure. They had known for a long time. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth and reminded myself that I had already used my good breakdown energy on Calder upstairs, and I was not going to spend the rest of it here on his brothers. "Here is what's interesting," I said finally, setting my mug down with a small, careful click. "I can touch things and feel what they remember. I have been doing it my whole life, and the thing that I have learned, the thing that nobody tells you about having this ability, is that the most dangerous information is never the thing you accidentally discover." I looked at Rhett. "It's the thing everyone around you already knew." Rhett held my gaze. Something moved through his expression that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, but lived in the neighborhood of both. Sawyer made a sound, low and rough. Yachin pressed his fingers to his mouth. Calder had not said a word since his brothers walked in. I picked up my mug, finished my coffee, and set it in the sink. "I'm going to need all three of you in the living room," I said, "and someone should probably tell Brianna she can leave now. She made her point." I walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. Then I heard Rhett say, very quietly to Calder, "I told you he would find out," and Calder said nothing, which was somehow the loudest thing I had heard all day. The living room of the Maddox estate was designed to intimidate. 14-foot ceilings, dark walnut floors, two leather sofas facing each other across a coffee table that probably cost more than my first car, a fireplace that had never once been lit in the 3 years I had lived here, which I had always found telling about the kind of warmth this house was actually capable of producing. I sat in the armchair by the window, not the sofa. The armchair was a deliberate choice. It was singular, separated, and it meant none of them could sit next to me and make this feel like a family discussion rather than what it actually was. An accounting. They filed in slowly. Calder first, then Rhett, then Sawyer, who quietly closed the living room door behind him, like he was sealing something in. They took the sofas without discussion, Calder on the left, Rhett and Sawyer on the right, and for a moment the three of them just looked at me with the particular unified energy of men who had spent their whole lives moving as one unit, and were only now realizing that unity had a cost. I crossed one leg over the other and waited. Calder opened his mouth. "Let Rhett go first," I said. Calder closed his mouth. Rhett leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers laced together. He had the focused stillness of someone who had walked into difficult conversations professionally for years and knew how to position himself in them. Steady, controlled. Genuinely, I thought, trying. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You do," I agreed. I knew about Brianna for 4 months. Sawyer knew for 3. We confronted Calder. We told him it needed to stop. He held my gaze without flinching, which I noted. "We should have told you. The reason we didn't is not a good one, and I'm not going to dress it up." "Try anyway," I said. "I'm curious what the bad reason was." A beat. "Pack stability. Calder is the primary alpha. Oh, a fracture in his bond status affects the whole pack's hierarchy externally. We were managing the fallout timeline." I stared at him. "You were managing," I said slowly, "my betrayal, like a PR crisis." Sawyer made a pained sound from his end of the sofa. "That is not how I would characterize it," Rhett said carefully. "Rhett." I kept my voice very pleasant. "I say this with complete sincerity. That is exactly how you characterized it. You used the word timeline." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Sawyer leaned forward now, and his version of this was less boardroom and more raw. His hands were clasped tight enough that his knuckles had gone pale. "Elian, I'm sorry. Not the managed version, not the pack stability version. I'm just sorry. I sat across from you at dinner last week and I knew, and I said nothing, and that was wrong. That was genuinely wrong, and I don't have a framework for it that makes it okay." I looked at him for a moment. The sincerity in his voice was real. My ability did not need a surface to confirm it. It was in the tension of his jaw and the way he was not trying to fix his expression into something more comfortable. "I know," I said quietly. "I can feel that you mean it." Something in Sawyer's face broke open slightly, just at the edges. "That almost makes it worse," he admitted. "Yes," I said. "It does." Calder had been silent through all of this with the energy of a man sitting inside a controlled detonation, waiting to see which direction the damage traveled. I turned to look at him now and watched him straighten almost imperceptibly, the automatic response of an alpha being directly regarded. "Your turn," I said. He looked at me. The management voice was gone. The exhaustion from upstairs was gone. What was left was something quieter and considerably harder to look at, which was the version of Calder Maddox that appeared only when he had run out of ways to be strategic about his own feelings. "I don't know how to explain it without it sounding like an excuse," and he said, "Try without the disclaimer. The disclaimer is just preemptive negotiation, and we're past that." A long pause. "I felt you pulling away first. A year ago. Maybe more." His voice was low and even, but something underneath it was not. "You stopped touching me. Not dramatically. Just small things. You'd walk into a room and not reach for me the way you used to. I told myself it was your work, some of your ability, that you were overstimulated. But it started to feel like you'd already read everything about me worth reading and decided there was nothing left that surprised you." The room was very quiet. I felt something move through my chest that I did not particularly want to feel right now. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, but the specific ache of recognizing a truth that has been sitting unspoken between two people so long It has grown its own roots. So you found someone who didn't know you yet, I said. He did not answer. He did not need to. Calder. I uncrossed my legs and leaned forward slightly. I stopped reaching for you because every time I touched you, I felt how far away you already were. I wasn't pulling back. I was protecting myself from a door that was already closing. I held his gaze. You didn't cheat because I stopped seeing you. You checked out because you were afraid of being seen all the way through. Those are different things. His throat moved. Rhett was very still beside him. Sawyer was looking at the floor. I stood up. Here is what happens now, I said. I'm going to go upstairs to our bedroom, and I am going to pack a bag. Not everything, just enough. And I'm going to need all three of you to sit with what just happened in this room without following me or managing the timeline of it. Calder stood. Elian, wait. Sit down, Calder. He sat down. Even I was a little surprised by that. I walked toward the doorway and stopped with my hand on the frame. The wood gave me back the whole history of this room in a single pulse. Not years of pack meetings and formal dinners, and three brothers who loved each other fiercely and badly, and had never once learned to love someone outside their unit without eventually closing ranks. For what it's worth, I said, without turning around, I did love you, all three of you, in the specific ways you each needed and never asked for. I just wish one of you had loved me back loudly enough for me to hear it. I let go of the doorframe, and I walked upstairs. The bedroom smelled like Calder. It always had. Cedar and something darker underneath, like soil after rain, the particular alpha scent that had once made me feel safe, and was now just information I did not know what to do with. I stood in the doorway for exactly 2 seconds, taking inventory of a room I had shared for 3 years, and then I walked to the closet and pulled out my travel bag. The good one. The one I had bought myself. Naturally. I set it on the bed and started moving. Efficiently. The way you move when you are operating on a frequency above emotion, because if you drop down into the feeling right now, you will sit on the floor, and that is simply not the aesthetic I was going for today. Shirts. 2, 3. A sweater because Connecticut in October had opinions, and I respected them. My work tablet from the nightstand, my charger, the small leather notebook I used for client sessions that contained 3 years of professional observations, and absolutely none of my personal feelings because I had apparently been saving all of those for this exact Tuesday. I opened the dresser drawer for socks and my hand landed on a folded piece of paper. I did not mean to read it. My ability does not ask permission. The flash came fast and specific. Rhett's handwriting. Recent, maybe 2 weeks ago. The emotional imprint on it was sharp and uncomfortable. The particular texture of a man writing something he knew he should say out loud but could not bring himself to. The feeling coming off the paper was not guilt exactly. It was longing, directed at me. I dropped the paper like it had bitten me, stood there for a moment with my hand against my sternum and my brain doing a full recalibration. Rhett. Rhett had written me a letter he never gave me 2 weeks ago that felt like longing. I looked at the folded paper sitting in the drawer. I did not pick it up again because I was packing a bag, not excavating a disaster. And there was a strict operational order to this afternoon that I intended to maintain for the sake of my own structural integrity. I closed the drawer, moved to the bathroom. Toothbrush, face wash, the expensive moisturizer that Sawyer had actually bought me 8 months ago because he had noticed, without being asked, that the dry Connecticut winter was affecting my skin. He had left it on the bathroom counter with no note, which at the time I had found quietly thoughtful, and was now filing under information that required more processing than I currently had bandwidth for. I put the moisturizer in the bag. I was not leaving it. I did not care what that said about me. I was zipping the bag when I heard the knock. Not Calder's knock. Calder had a specific cadence. 2 quick raps, alpha assertive, and the knock of a man who considered knocking a formality rather than a genuine request. This was a single knock, patient. Like the person on the other side had stood outside the door for a moment before deciding to use it. Sawyer. It's open, I said. He came in slowly, which was not how Sawyer usually moved. Sawyer usually entered rooms the way weather changed, gradually and then all at once, warmth preceding him like a front. This version came in carefully, hands in his pockets, and stopped near the foot of the bed. He looked at the bag. Something in his face did a quiet thing that he did not try to hide. "You're really leaving," he said. "I'm really leaving," I confirmed. He nodded, processing that. "Yeah, where are you going?" "I have a colleague in New Haven who has been offering me a spare room since last spring." I smoothed the top of the bag. I kept declining because I thought I had a home. Sawyer made a sound that was not quite a word. "Elian." He said my name differently than his brothers did. Calder said it like a boundary. Rhett said it like a calculation. Sawyer said it like something he was a little afraid to put down. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not use your ability on me while I do it, because I want you to just hear it as words first, not as whatever emotional data I'm apparently leaking." I looked at him. "That's a very specific request." "I know. I can't actually turn it off, Sawyer." "I know that too." He held my gaze. "I'm asking anyway." I studied him for a moment. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and folded my hands in my lap, the closest thing to a controlled read I could offer. "Okay, talk." He exhaled, looked at the window, looked back at me. "I have been in love with you since the winter of your first year here. Since that packed dinner where the Henderson Alpha said something dismissive about presented omegas in professional fields, and you smiled at him and then systematically dismantled every argument he had, using only his own words and a bread roll you kept gesturing with for emphasis." I blinked. "The bread roll dinner," I said. "The bread roll dinner," he confirmed. "I told Calder, right after. I told him how I felt, and he asked me to step back because the bond was new, and he needed the stability, and I said, okay, because he is my brother, and that is what I do." His voice was steady, but the steadiness was costing him. I have been saying okay to that for 3 years, and watching him waste something I would have. He stopped, pressed his lips together. Something I would have taken very good care of. The room was very quiet. My hands were folded in my lap, and I was absolutely not using my ability, and I did not need to because Sawyer's face was doing everything his voice was trying not to. "That is," I said carefully, "a significant amount of information to receive while packing a bag." "I know." "Sawyer, I'm not asking you to stay," he said quickly. "I want to be clear. I'm not using this to keep you here. Hey, He looked at me with something unguarded and exhausted and very real. "I needed you to know that someone in this house saw you, clearly, the whole time." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I picked up my bag. "I know," I said quietly. "I felt it. I just didn't let myself understand it." His breath caught. I walked past him toward the door and stopped beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "That almost made me angrier than the rest of it," I said softly, "because you were right here." I walked out before he could answer. Behind me, I heard him exhale like something had been holding his lungs closed for 3 years and had just finally let go. Brianna was in the hallway. Of course she was. She was standing near the top of the stairs with her coat on and her bag over her shoulder, whining, which meant someone downstairs had relayed the message that her presence was no longer required. She had changed out of Calder's shirt, which I appreciated on a purely logistical level, and she was wearing the expression of a woman who had decided that the best defense was a very particular kind of offense. I saw it the moment she saw me. The recalibration, the slight lift of her chin, the decision made in real time that she was not going to be the one who looked away first. I kept walking toward the stairs. She stepped slightly into the center of the hallway, not enough to be obviously blocking, just enough to be a choice. I stopped, looked at her. "Brianna," I said pleasantly, "are you leaving or are you auditioning for something?" "I just want to say one thing," she said. "No, you really don't have to." He was never happy. Her voice was measured and precise, the voice of someone who had rehearsed this. "Whatever you think you had, whatever you think you were to him, he was never happy with you. I didn't take anything that was yours. I just picked up what you couldn't hold." I stood very still. The hallway was quiet around us. My travel bag was in my left hand, and my right hand was completely relaxed at my side, and I was doing a rapid internal assessment of exactly what kind of man I wanted to be in the next 15 seconds. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay?" "Okay," I said again. "You wanted to say one thing. You said it. Now I'm going to say one thing back, and then we're both going to move on with our lives." I tilted my head slightly. "You didn't pick up something I dropped." You helped someone betray a bond they chose freely and called it love so you could live with yourself. Those are different things, and the fact that you're standing in my hallway right now, making sure I know he was unhappy, tells me a lot more about what you needed from this than what he did. Her composure flickered. Just once. Just enough. You don't know anything about what we have, she said. The measured voice had developed a small crack in it. I know everything about what you have, and I said. I touched his hand at our bonding ceremony, and I felt a man already half checked out. I touched this house for 3 years and felt you in every corner of it. I know the exact Tuesday in August when whatever you two were became something you both stopped pretending was casual. I watched her face go very still. I am a psychometrist. Brianna, the house literally told me your schedule. She stared at me, and then she did something I had not predicted. She stepped forward and put her hand flat against my chest. Not hard, not a shove, a pressure. The specific physical language of someone who wanted to establish that they were not afraid and had misjudged the room entirely. Move on, Omega, she said quietly. You lost. The thing about having psychometry is that unsolicited physical contact from someone carrying 3 years of emotional information about your life hits like a full sensory detonation. What I got from her palm against my chest was fast and specific and absolutely volcanic. Her own uncertainty. Underneath all the composure, underneath the rehearsed lines and the borrowed shirt and the carefully constructed position of woman who won, there was a deep and unsteady fear that none of this was actually real, that Calder was a conquest and not a choice, that she had spent 3 years wanting something that was only available because someone else was already holding it. She was not in love with Calder. She was in love with winning, and I felt every single layer of that in under 2 seconds. I looked down at her hand on my chest. I looked back up at her face, and then I slapped her. Not a movie slap, not a dramatic, slow-motion, soundtrack moment. A real one. Flat palm, full intention, the specific sound of someone who had been measured and calm and psychometrically overwhelmed for 4 straight hours and had reached the precise and reasonable limit of what a person should be expected to absorb in a single Tuesday afternoon. Brianna's head turned with it. Her hand dropped from my chest. When the hallway went absolutely silent, she turned back slowly. Her cheek was red. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time since I had opened that guest room door, she looked genuinely, completely unprepared. I have felt everything in this house for 3 years, I said. My voice was quiet and very clear. And the only thing I feel from you right now is the specific embarrassment of a woman who just realized she put her hand on an Omega who has nothing left to lose today. I picked my bag back up from where I had set it against the wall. You didn't win anything, Brianna. You inherited a man who already taught himself not to feel. Good luck with that. I walked past her to the stairs. Behind me, I heard her exhale, shaking and sharp, the breath of someone reassembling themselves in real time. I was 3 steps down when Calder appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He had heard it. The sound of that slap in a 14-foot ceilinged colonial house had the acoustics of a thunderclap, and every single person downstairs knew exactly what it was. He looked up at me on the stairs. I looked down at him. She put her hand on me, I said simply. A long pause. I know, he said. Good. I came down the remaining steps and stopped on the last one, so that we were eye level for once, and I did not have to look up at him. Then we're done here. His jaw worked. His eyes were doing the thing again. The thing I had spent 3 years translating and would spend considerably less time on going forward. Elian, he said, quiet and stripped of everything strategic. Just my name. Just the sound of a man who had run out of moves. Please don't go. I looked at him for a long moment. Really looked. The way I had been looking at him all afternoon, clear and full, and without the protective filter of love I had been wearing for 3 years, like prescription glasses that were the wrong strength. You should have said that, I told him gently, before Tuesday. I stepped around him, and I walked to the front door. The October air hit me the moment I pushed through the front door, cold and clean and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened inside that house, which I appreciated more than I could say. Connecticut autumn did not care about pack bonds or charcoal shirts or the specific acoustics of a hallway slap. It just smelled like dying leaves and distant wood smoke and the particular freedom of outside after too long in an enclosed space. And I walked down the front steps and across the gravel drive toward my car. My hands were steady. I noted that with a small, private satisfaction. 3 hours of emotional detonation, and my hands were still steady. Elian Voss Maddox, holding it together on a Tuesday in October. Someone should write that on something. I got to my car and opened the trunk and put my bag inside and closed it with a clean, definitive click that felt better than it had any right to. Then I stood there for a moment with my hand on the trunk and let myself breathe. The gravel under my shoes, the cold moving through my jacket, the sound of a car somewhere down Carver Hill doing something ordinary and uncomplicated. I focused on all of it deliberately, and the way my therapist had taught me 2 years ago when my ability started bleeding into my sleep and I had needed techniques for staying inside my own body instead of everyone else's emotional residue. I was here. I was okay. I had packed a bag and said true things and slapped someone who had genuinely earned it, and I was going to get in my car and drive to New Haven and call my colleague Petra from the highway and ask if the spare room offer was still open. That was the plan. I was executing the plan. The front door opened. I did not turn around immediately. I took one more breath first because I knew the footsteps and I wanted to be fully assembled before I had to deal with them. Rhett. He walked across the gravel with that measured, deliberate stride and stopped about 4 feet away. Not close enough to crowd, not far enough to be a choice. I turned around. He looked different outside the house. The boardroom stillness was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. His collar was still open, jacket still off, and the October cold was doing nothing to his composure except making him look slightly more human, which was honestly an improvement. He had something in his hand. A folded piece of paper. My chest did a complicated thing. "You felt it," he said, not accusing, just confirming. "In the dresser drawer," I said. I didn't read it. The impression came through the paper before I could choose not to. He looked at the paper in his hand. "Then you know what it says." "I know what it felt like," I said carefully. "That's not the same as knowing what it says." He looked up at me. Something in his expression was stripped in a way I had never seen from Rhett Maddox, who was constitutionally opposed to being caught without his composure fully in place. He held the letter out. I looked at it for a moment, then I took it. The impression hit again, same as before, same longing with the specific texture of a man who had been precise and controlled his entire life, and had written one honest thing and then folded it up and put it somewhere it might be found, rather than somewhere it would have to be answered. I unfolded it. His handwriting was exactly what I would have predicted. Clean and architectural, the kind of penmanship that came from someone who approached everything, including letters, as a system to be executed correctly. It said, "Elian. I have been trying to write this for 8 months. I don't know how to say it without it sounding like an excuse for everything I didn't do, so I'm going to just say it plainly. You deserve better than what this house gave you. You deserve better than what I allowed to continue, and the part I can't make clean or strategic or logistically sound is that the reason it hurt to watch was not just because it was wrong. It was because for a very long time I have wanted to be the one you came home to. I don't expect you to do anything with that. I just needed it to exist somewhere outside of me." I read it twice, folded it back up, held it in both hands and looked at Rhett standing 4 feet away in the cold, with his hands loose at his sides and his face doing the specific thing it did when he had committed to something and was waiting to find out what it cost. 8 months, I said. "Took me 8 months, he confirmed. "Rhett." I turned the folded letter over in my fingers. "You ran a timeline on my betrayal for 4 months and also had this in a drawer for 8. I am aware of the contradiction. Those two things cannot coexist in a person who is supposed to be intelligent. And yet," he said quietly, "here we are." I looked at him. Really looked, the way I had been looking at all of them today, clear and unfiltered, and without the comfortable blur of routine. Rhett Maddox with his structured handwriting and his pack stability timelines, and his 8-month letter that he had put in a dresser drawer like a confession he was not ready to make out loud. "Why didn't you give it to me?" I asked. Because giving it to you meant choosing myself over my brother. A pause. I have never done that. I don't know how to do that. It's possibly my most significant personal failing, and I am only now understanding the full dimension of it. The gravel shifted under my feet as I took one step toward him. His breath changed, just slightly. I put the letter back in his hand and closed his fingers around it. Learn how, I said, before the next person you love has to pack a bag to make you say it out loud. His hand closed around mine for 1 second, warm and deliberate and very careful. Then I let go. Walked to my car door, opened it. Elian! His voice came across the gravel, quiet and unstrategic and completely real. Where will you go? Forward, I said. I got in, started the engine. In the rearview mirror, Rhett stood in the driveway with the letter in his hand and watched me until I turned out of the gate and Carver Hill took him out of my sight. I drove exactly 4 minutes before I had to pull over. Not because I was crying, I was not crying. I pulled over because my hands had finally, after 3 hours of holding everything together, started shaking. I sat with it, breathed through it, let my ability run quiet against the steering wheel, and felt nothing but the residue of my own choices, present tense and entirely mine. Then I pulled back onto the road. 3 weeks later, I came back to Ashford, not to the estate, not to Carver Hill or the limestone walls, or the fireplace that had never once been lit. I came back to the Maddox Holdings annual Pack Gala at the Ashford Grand, which was held every October in a ballroom that cost more per evening than most people's monthly rent, and was attended by every significant Pack family in Connecticut. I had received my invitation 4 months ago before Tuesday happened, back when I was still Elian Voss Maddox, and that name meant something inside these walls. I kept the invitation. I also called 3 people. My attorney, a journalist named Declan Price who covered Pack hierarchy and corporate ethics for the Hartford Examiner and owed me a professional favor from a consult I had done for his paper 2 years ago. And Petra, who had let me sleep in her spare room for 3 weeks and had asked no questions except the important ones. I wore charcoal gray, not Calder's color, mine, different shade entirely. I walked into that ballroom at 8:47 in the evening, and I want to be very clear that I did not make an entrance. I simply arrived and the room noticed on its own, which is a different thing and considerably more effective. The gala was full, 200 people minimum. Pack representatives from 6 Connecticut territories, corporate partners, legal teams, the particular ecosystem of powerful people who attended these events to be seen attending them. A string quartet in the corner, champagne moving through the room on silver trays. I took a glass, drank none of it. I was looking for a specific table. I found it near the center of the room. Calder, Rhett, and Sawyer, positioned as they always were at these events. The architecture of the Maddox Pack on full display. Calder at the head, Rhett to his left, and Sawyer across from him. Brianna Holt was seated beside Calder. She had a new necklace on. Significant. The kind of piece that gets chosen publicly. I noted all of this from across the room the way you note the weather. Informational, relevant, not personal. Sawyer saw me first. He went very still. Then Rhett. Rhett's eyes found me across the room and something in his face shifted, fast and controlled, but not fast enough. Calder was mid-conversation with a man from the Fairfield Pack when he registered his brother's attention redirecting. He turned. He saw me, and I watched the color change in his face with the specific satisfaction of a man who had spent 3 weeks in a spare room deciding exactly what he wanted this moment to look like. I walked to the table, unhurried, glass in hand, the full room between us, and then not. Coelian. Calder's voice was the management version again, controlled and careful in the presence of witnesses. I didn't know you were coming. I know, I said pleasantly. That was the point. Brianna looked at me with the recalibrated composure she had been working on since the hallway. Better than last time. Points for effort. I did not look at her long enough to give her the acknowledgement. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and placed a single folded document on the table in front of Calder. He looked down at it. What is this? Your financial records from the Maddox Holdings subsidiary account registered under Brianna Holt's consulting firm, I said. 18 months of payments. I am a behavioral consultant, Calder. I consult for 3 firms. two of which share compliance oversight with your board. When I touched the documents in this house over 3 years, I was not always reading emotional history. I paused. Sometimes I was reading financial history. I simply needed the right forensic accountant to confirm what I already felt. The table had gone completely silent. Those payments, I continued at the same pleasant conversational volume, constitute undisclosed conflict of interest on 4 separate Maddox Holdings board decisions. Declan Price at the Hartford Examiner received a copy at 8:30 this evening. His editor confirmed publication for the morning edition approximately 20 minutes ago. Calder stared at the document. The man from the Fairfield PAC had stopped pretending not to listen. Brianna's hand on the table was no longer relaxed. You recorded nothing that was private, Rhett said from across the table. Quiet and precise. Not a protest. An observation. Checking the architecture of what I had done. I recorded nothing, I agreed. I read. And then I handed what I read to someone with a forensic accounting license and a press credential. I looked at Rhett steadily. Nothing I did was illegal. Everything I found was real. Rhett held my gaze. Something moved through his expression. Not anger, respect. Calder pushed back from the table. Elian, we need to talk about this privately. We really don't. You don't understand what this will do to the PAC. I looked at him then, fully. For the last time, I thought. The last time I would stand this close and look at this face and feel the full weight of everything it had cost me to love it badly. And you didn't lose me, Calder, I said. You threw me away. Those are different things. And you don't get to regret me in private while the public version of you stays clean. The ballroom had developed the specific hush of 200 people pretending not to hear something they absolutely could hear. Brianna stood up. You have no right to come in here and destroy everything because you couldn't hold his attention. I turned to look at her, and I smiled. Sit down, Brianna, I said softly. The house already told me everything. She sat down. Even she looked surprised that she had sat down. I set my untouched champagne glass on the table with a small, clean click. Sawyer stood up from his chair. His voice was low. Elian, please. I looked at him, the warmth in his face, the 3 years of it. The bread roll dinner and the moisturizer on the bathroom counter, and the way he said my name like something he was afraid to put down. Take care of yourself, Sawyer, I said quietly. Not the PAC, yourself. His throat moved. I stepped back from the table. Elian! Calder's voice came from behind me, stripped of every layer of management and strategy, down to something raw and too late. Don't walk out of here. Please, we can fix this. I did not turn around, not once. I walked through that ballroom with 200 people watching and the string quartet playing something in a minor key that felt, honestly, perfectly timed, and I pushed through the doors into the October night and kept moving. The cold hit me the same way it had 3 weeks ago. Clean and indifferent and entirely mine. The boy who had touched that banister and felt the truth and loved them anyway did not walk out of the Ashford Grand that night. Someone sharper did. Someone who finally trusted what he knew. And this time, I didn't look back. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even crazier and more intriguing than you can imagine. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. The next story drops soon.